I had been the lead systems architect at Omnitech for 6 years, and I was the definition of an invisible employee. I didn't wear fancy suits, I didn't play golf with the executives, and I never spoke up in the massive quarterly meetings. I just sat in my corner office with 3 monitors, drinking black coffee, and keeping the company's multi-million-dollar software infrastructure running flawlessly. Because I was quiet, our brand new VP of Operations, a slick, overly cologne guy named Bradley, immediately assumed I was useless. Bradley had been hired to trim the fat and maximize corporate profits. He loved using buzzwords like synergy and lean optimization. And unfortunately for him, he decided I was his first target. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of writing a patch for the massive data migration scheduled for Friday, a critical update for our biggest client, a national bank. Bradley strolled into my office unannounced, holding a sleek tablet. He didn't even knock. "Hey buddy," he said, leaning against my doorframe. "I was looking over the payroll and I see you are pulling a massive salary for a guy who just stares at code all day. I have junior devs out of college who could do your job for a third of the price." I didn't look away from my monitors. "The system architecture is incredibly complex, Bradley," I replied calmly. "It takes years to understand how the legacy code integrates with our new API." Bradley rolled his eyes and scoffed loudly. "Code is code," Bradley sneered, tapping his tablet. "I've already outsourced 3 of our back-end departments to an overseas agency. We're going lean. You need to justify your existence to me by the end of the week, or I am going to have to make some aggressive corporate realignments." He turned and walked out, leaving a cloud of cheap cologne in his wake. I stopped typing. I stared at my screen, a slow, cold smile creeping across my face. Bradley had no idea how Omnitech actually functioned. He had no idea that 4 years ago, I personally engineered the custom API that routed all of the bank's secure transactions. And more importantly, he didn't know the exact terms of the contract I signed when I built it. When I created that API, I did it on my own time, using my own proprietary framework long before Omnitech became a massive corporation. The CEO at the time struck a unique deal with me. The company didn't own the software. They were simply leasing the commercial license from me. And buried deep in page 42 of my original employment contract was a very specific ironclad clause. The commercial license for the banking API remains active strictly under the condition of my continued full-time employment. If I quit or if I was terminated, the license immediately revoked itself, completely shutting down the software to protect my intellectual property. Thursday afternoon, less than 24 hours before the bank's massive data migration, Bradley called me into his glass-walled office. He was sitting behind his desk, flanked by an uncomfortable-looking HR representative. On the desk between them was a single cardboard box. "Have a seat," Bradley said, lacing his fingers together with a smug grin. "As I mentioned earlier this week, we are optimizing our overhead. After reviewing your department, I've decided your role is entirely redundant. We are terminating your employment, effective immediately." The HR rep slid a stack of termination papers across the desk. I looked at the papers, then looked up at Bradley. My face was completely expressionless. "Effective immediately?" I asked softly. "Bradley, we have the national bank migration tomorrow at midnight. I am the only one with the administrator credentials to oversee the server transfer." Bradley laughed, waving his hand dismissively. "Don't try to make yourself sound indispensable. I've already given your login credentials to the new overseas team. They assure me it's a simple drag-and-drop operation. You are officially locked out of the system." He pushed the cardboard box toward me. "Sign the severance papers, pack your desk, and hand over your security badge. Security will escort you to your car in 15 minutes. The HR representative looked nervously at Bradley. "Sir, standard protocol usually allows for a 2-week transition period for senior architects," she whispered. Bradley glared at her. "Not when they are disgruntled. I want him out of the building before he tries to sabotage anything." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up the pen and signed the termination papers with a completely steady hand. By signing those documents, I wasn't just ending my employment. I was legally triggering the kill switch on the commercial API. I stood up, dropped my plastic security badge on his desk, and looked Bradley dead in the eyes. "Good luck with the migration tomorrow, Bradley," I said. I packed up my mechanical keyboard, my favorite coffee mug, and a framed picture of my dog. As the security guard walked me through the open plan office, I saw the junior developers staring at me in total shock. They knew exactly how much the company relied on me. I gave them a polite nod, walked out the glass front doors and drove home. I ordered a large pepperoni pizza, opened a cold beer and sat on my couch. I didn't feel angry or betrayed. I just felt a deep, profound sense of peace. I knew the exact second the bomb was going to go off. Friday came and went quietly. I slept in, went for a run and caught up on my favorite TV shows. At exactly 11:55 p.m., I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat at my kitchen island, opening my personal laptop. I didn't log into the company servers. That would be illegal. I simply opened the public status page for the National Bank's online portal. I watched the clock tick down. 11:58. 11:59. Midnight. I hit refresh on the browser. Instantly, the bank's website went completely blank, replaced by a massive, bold error code. 503 fatal gateway error. API license revoked. I took a slow sip of my scotch. The dominoes had officially started to fall. My phone started ringing at exactly 12:04 a.m. The caller ID flashed Bradley's name. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then a text came through. Hey, the overseas team is having a slight issue with the data migration. Can you hop on a quick call to walk them through it? We'll authorize overtime pay. I smiled, ignoring the message completely. 10 minutes later, the text became frantic. The bank's portal is down. We are losing millions of transactions a minute. Pick up the phone immediately. I turned my phone on silent, closed my laptop, and went to sleep like a baby. I woke up at 8 a.m. on Saturday to 74 missed calls, over 100 text messages, and 18 urgent voicemails. The messages had transitioned from Bradley's arrogant demands to absolute, unfiltered panic. The overseas team locked themselves out. The bank's CEO is threatening to sue us for breach of contract. Please call me back. I am begging you. I finally unlocked my phone, but I didn't call Bradley. I dialed the direct cell phone number of Omnitech's actual CEO, Richard. Richard picked up on the first half ring. He sounded like he hadn't slept in a week. Thank God, Richard gasped. What is happening? The bank is threatening to destroy us. Bradley said you sabotaged the servers before you left. I kept my voice incredibly calm and professional. I didn't sabotage anything, Richard. Bradley terminated me, effective immediately. Per the exact terms of my original employment contract from 4 years ago, my termination automatically revoked the company's lease on my proprietary banking API. The line went dead silent for 5 agonizing seconds. I could practically hear the gears turning in Richard's head as he realized the catastrophic mistake his new VP of operations had made. Your proprietary API? Richard whispered in horror. Bradley fired the only man who owns the software running our biggest account? He wanted to trim the fat, I replied smoothly. And unfortunately, I no longer work for Omnitech, which means I am not legally authorized to touch your servers. Richard sounded like he was on the verge of a heart attack. Name your price, he pleaded. Whatever it takes. We need that API turned back on right now or this company is bankrupt by Monday morning. I took a sip of my morning coffee. I am no longer an employee, Richard. However, my new independent consulting firm is currently taking on clients. My emergency weekend rate contract for system restoration and a permanent, transferred API license is $500,000. Done, Richard said without a microsecond of hesitation. I will have the legal team email you the consulting contract in 10 minutes. Just please fix this. I hung up the phone. 30 minutes later, I signed the $500,000 consulting agreement digitally and emailed it back to corporate. Then I opened my personal terminal. Because I wrote the code, it took me exactly 3 keystrokes and less than 40 seconds to reactivate the commercial license and reboot the servers. I checked the bank's public status page. The error code vanished and the massive financial portal came back online, running perfectly smooth. On Monday morning, I didn't wear my usual casual sweater. I put on a sharp, dark suit and drove back to the Omnitech headquarters. I didn't have a security badge anymore, so I walked right up to the front reception desk. Before I could even ask to be signed in as a guest, the CEO, Richard, came rushing out into the lobby. He looked exhausted but immensely relieved. He shook my hand vigorously. The bank CEO just called. The migration was completely stabilized over the weekend. Thank you, Richard said. We have your payment processing right now. I nodded politely. It was a pleasure doing business with you, Richard. Oh, by the way, is Bradley around? I'd love to thank him for the opportunity. Richard's face darkened immediately. He gestured for me to follow him. We walked past the open plan office where the junior devs were all staring at me with massive, awestruck smiles. They had clearly figured out exactly what happened over the weekend. We approached Bradley's glass-walled office. Bradley was standing over his desk, his face pale and sweating profusely as an HR representative, the exact same woman from Thursday, stood over him with a clipboard. On the desk between them was a single empty cardboard box. Bradley looked up and saw me standing next to the CEO in my expensive suit. His jaw dropped. He looked like he was going to be physically sick. Richard stepped into the office, his voice echoing loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. Bradley, the CEO said coldly, due to your gross negligence and complete lack of technical oversight, you nearly cost this company $100 million account. Your role is entirely redundant. We are terminating your employment, effective immediately. Bradley started stammering, his hands shaking as he looked between the cardboard box and the CEO. Sir, please? I was just following the cost-cutting mandate. I didn't know he owned the code. I can fix this. Richard didn't even blink. You can fix it by packing your desk. Security will escort you out in 5 minutes. Richard turned and walked away, completely done with the conversation. I stepped into the doorway, leaning against the glass frame exactly the way Bradley had done to me a week earlier. Bradley glared at me, his eyes filled with absolute venom and humiliation. You planned this, he hissed, tossing his fancy tablet into the cardboard box. You set me up. You knew the whole system was going to crash. I smiled perfectly, keeping my voice low and calm. I didn't plan anything, Bradley. Code is code, remember? You just wanted a leaner operation. I'm just a consultant now, optimizing my own revenue. I pushed off the door frame and turned to leave. As I walked toward the elevators, I heard the heavy footsteps of the security guard walking past me to escort Bradley out of the building. By Friday, the $500,000 consulting fee had cleared directly into my bank account. I used a fraction of it to pay off my mortgage, and the rest went into early retirement investments. I never returned to the corporate world again. I learned the ultimate lesson of the modern workplace. They can replace your desk, they can outsource your job, but they can never outsource the guy holding the only set of keys.